Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. I am Nicole Pascal. I'm the marketing specialist here at Topaz Labs, and I'm so pleased to have Greg Rostami with us here once again to introduce and demonstrate some of the awesome things you can do with the Topaz Bundle. All right, first I will go ahead and introduce Greg. Greg has been an influential force here at Topaz since the beginning and continues to be at the forefront of our ever-developing plugins. He is our featured trade show presenter, so if you've seen him or if you've been to some shows, you may have seen him presenting Topaz Lab software. Greg is an accomplished innovator of digital technologies and has worked for years in the realm of special effects, animation, and digital restoration. In his early 20s, Greg was designing and creating graphics for animation projects, games, and scientific movies, and eventually worked on a job for DreamQuest, working on the ride film project Space Shuttle America. Creating special effects for movies, some of those movies include Batman Forever, Outbreak, and Deep Blue Sea. He began working for EDS Digital Studios, where he developed technologies to start digitally restoring films, including Gone with the Wind. And in 1999, he built the world's first all-digital transfer process for Disney's animated features, changing the way Disney viewed electronic distribution, which was a critical element with all of the new emerging e-cinema technologies coming out today. Currently, Greg continues to work on special effects and animation projects, and we're very fortunate to have him part of the Topaz team. In addition to his digital innovations, Greg is an accomplished magician, and he combines his talents to create such applications as iForce, which is the #1 iPhone app for magic on the market today, and iPredict, which is also a revolutionary magic app. And today we are here to see him show us little Topaz magic. All right, and with that, I will give it over to Greg.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole. What an incredible introduction. I really appreciate it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Topaz Labs. Now, Nicole, can you see me okay, actually? Let me see if, oh, here we go. I got to go show my screen. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can see it perfectly.
Okay, perfect. All right. Now, as Nicole said, if you ever go to trade shows, you will see me doing the demonstration for Topaz Labs. And today, I'm going to essentially go through that demonstration, but because we do have more time, it allows me to dive into some more details and further explanations of exactly what's going on, both under the hood of Topaz Labs as well as how to use the software. So my favorite photograph to start the demo with is this photo right here. A lot of people ask me how this photo was taken. It was just taken during my honeymoon in France. And you can see that it's a Casio camera that took it, and it was 1/400th of a second. And that's one of the reasons why the image is so unbelievably dark. So I'm going to show you now how, using Topaz Denoise and Topaz Adjust, how we're going to create the fully exposed version of that image. Now, what's interesting about JPEGs that are really dark is if you were to take them into Photoshop and try to brighten it up, you're going to notice the very classic problem of noise. So a long time ago, when it comes to dark photos, we realized that actually the dark isn't necessarily the problem as much as the noise is the problem. So let's just jump right into it and show you exactly how this is done. Now, I'm going to do the first part of this in Photoshop, but you'll see me continuously jump between Photoshop and iPhoto because the Topaz Labs plugins and filters work with Photoshop, Photoshop Elements, Aperture, Lightroom, and even iPhoto, which is great because iPhoto comes with every Mac. And of course, on the PC, there's a countless number of applications that Topaz Labs works with. So first, here is Photoshop, and I've opened up my image, and you can see that it says here that this is a JPEG, which makes things a little bit harder, but that's okay. Under the Layers tab, I'm going to go ahead and give myself a duplicate of that, just so we can go back and forth between the original and the one we're going to modify. And the other thing I'm going to do is make sure that I'm going to work with this at 16 bits per channel. Okay. Now, whenever people see images that are that dark, oftentimes they ask me to actually show them a histogram of that image. So let me open up a histogram here for you, just so you can see that all of the information is, yes, it's basically stuck on the left-hand side of the histogram, and that obviously means that it's very, very dark. Now, if I wanted to count how many levels of digital information I have, all I have to do right now in Photoshop is to ask it to do just a simple equalize of the histogram. And what that does is that it takes that little bit of information that we had and it stretches it out. So now for the first time you can actually see that, yes, we really did have a photograph of a pizza. And it also allows me to count the number of digital levels of information that we have. Now, JPEG is only 8 bits per channel, and as I count, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's maybe about 13 or 14 levels of digital data per channel, which is equivalent to about 3 to 4 bits of data per channel, which is not really that much. And also, when you zoom in on it, you realize that, yeah, it's pretty noisy, so we really don't have much to work with. So now that you've seen what happens just in Photoshop, let me now show you what we do here at Topaz Labs. So I've selected now the layer which was my duplicate. Under Filter, I'm going to first jump down to Topaz Denoise. And immediately I could see how Topaz is taking the original brightness and it's kind of like brightening it up so it allows me to really analyze what the noise looks like. And I'm just going to apply a preset that I built from before just to speed things up. And once again, this is what it used to look like with all the noise, and now the noise is gone. So this was the most important part of the process. I hit OK. So now, even though Topaz Denoise is going to take out the noise, we still have the problem of a very dark image. Now, at this point, you can actually brighten it any way you want. In fact, I could have even chosen the equalize histogram like I did before with just Photoshop. But since I'm very familiar with Topaz Adjust, I'm going to just go ahead and jump into that. I can see the dark image. I can just crank up adaptive exposure, and let's crank it up somewhere around there. And this is, again, when we really see all the details that are there. And because we have eliminated the noise, I can even throw in a little bit of extra detail under the Details tab. In fact, we can even introduce a little bit of sharpness as well. So essentially, a few seconds ago, we had a situation where this image was so dark that you couldn't really see anything, whereas now we have an image where I could see the little rivets on a tablecloth, I could see the details that were on the shrimp. So I'll go ahead and hit OK over here. And now it's time to compare the histograms. You got to remember that what we started out with was only about 3 or 4 bits of information. And remember, that's what it used to look like. Whereas now, as you look at the histogram, you can see that it's filled with data. I always remember my science math teachers telling me you can't create more data from less data. But that's actually what's going on over here. That if you applied some very clever image processing. All right, now that we've seen, Topaz being applied to a situation which is kind of like a problem situation, let me just go through a few examples of this. And here's an example where what happened is accidentally I was exposing out the window, so everything inside is too dark. And again, Topaz has got a wonderful solution for that. So that's what it used to look like. That's what it looks like now. These are all my personal photos, and most of these photos are coming actually from my honeymoon. During my honeymoon, it was overcast in front of the Eiffel Tower, so once again, by using Topaz Adjust, this is the wonderful effect that we can get. And let me actually do this one here for you, just so you can see how it's done. Now, you notice that right now I am in iPhoto, which is great. Like I said before, it comes with every Mac. We're going to choose Edit in External Editor, and immediately I've already set up iPhoto so that the external editor is the Topaz Labs Fusion Express. I can choose any one of the Topaz Labs filters, so let's go ahead and jump into Topaz Adjust. And all of the Topaz Labs filters are broken down into 2 sides. The left side has presets, and you can also collapse any of those sides if you don't want to look at it. On the right-hand side, we have the sliders, and this is where people that are really concerned with the details can actually jump into here and move the sliders and get exactly the results that they want. And again, you can collapse that down as well. All right, so now that we're looking at the Eiffel Tower, I'm going to essentially try a preset. And as you move your cursor through the presets, in the upper left-hand corner, you can see how it actually changes. So it gives you a little preview of what's going to happen even before you click. And the moment that you click, if you like the effect, you just hit OK. So it's as simple as that. You find a preset you like, and you hit OK, and you're all done. But then, if you are interested in really playing with it, you can use the sliders. So as I crank this up, you can see that not only does the Eiffel Tower keep getting brighter, but also you are introducing all this wonderful detail that was hidden in the clouds, just magically comes out of nowhere. So this is essentially how I went from a photo that was just a silhouette of the Eiffel Tower to this beautiful, almost like HDR version of the Eiffel Tower, even though it's only one single JPEG and just a single exposure. So now that we've looked at a little bit of Topaz Adjust, it's really amazing for situations where you do have some level of underexposure. So once again, that's what the original image looks like. Here's what it looks like on the after. So here's just a few examples of things that have been underexposed. And here's, again, the before, here's the after, how we corrected them in Topaz. Finally, there's the opposite kind of a problem. Sometimes you have a situation where things are too bright. Now, here's a warning. If your image goes above white, I'm afraid there's really not much that Topaz can do for you because there's essentially a loss of information. So we're not going to be able to recover that. But if there is even the slightest amount of difference between these levels, Topaz Adjust really does miracles in bringing all these details out. You can see in the original image, we really didn't have too much color here within the trees, whereas in the after image here, we got the beautiful green and the colors from the trees and the other colors of even the sky. Coming through beautifully. In Topaz Adjust. Now I'm going to jump into another one of the Topaz filters, and this is actually a moderately new Topaz filter. We're going to talk about Topaz in Focus. This is a very classic situation where you're trying to catch the bad guy, and in this case, this is the bad guy right over here. And he's walking towards the car, and we are trying to figure out what the license plate of that car says, but we have no idea because there was a little bit of motion blur. So in this case, we're going to once again choose Topaz's external editor, Fusion Express, and just double-click on In Focus. So as I zoom in on it, I can see that I really can't read what the license plate says. And one of my favorite features of In Focus is where it says blur type unknown or estimate, which means I have no idea how this image got blurry. So I'm going to approximate that it's maybe about a blur radius of about 5 and just click Estimate Blur. And now we'll wait for the computer to do the calculations and see what it comes up with. There we go. That's pretty amazing. There was a time where I had no idea what the license plate says, whereas now I can see that it's PJ2DX. I really couldn't see who the bad guy was very well. Now I got a better idea of what he looks like. As we zoom out, we'll see even more details of the cars that are around it. Once again, we could not read any of the details. We didn't even really know what kind of car that was, whereas now it's becoming more and more clear. Now, Topaz in Focus is an ongoing project here at Topaz Labs, and on every iteration it's going to become better and better, but it's pretty miraculous the kind of things you can do with In Focus. So now that we've done a few things that are practical, let me finish up with something that's a little artistic. For those of you who enjoy doing portrait photography, here is one original portrait to start out with. Now we're going to use Topaz Clean, and one way of using Topaz Clean is just in a very subtle way. In fact, I just did it right now. This is what she used to look like. And I want you to notice how there are a few bumps here on her forehead. She's got a couple of bumps on her skin, and she's got an inconsistency with her makeup here on her cheek. Whereas when we look at the after version, all of that has been cleaned up pretty automatically. Now you can either use clean in a very subtle way, or you can really exaggerate it. And so here's what happens when you exaggerate. It looks almost like an illustration, like an artist, took an airbrush and actually painted that up. Now to show you exactly how this is done, let's just quickly jump into Topaz Clean. Again, notice that I am now in iPhoto. So we started out with Photoshop, but we're just playing with iPhoto right now. As I zoom in, it's easy for me to click on any one of the presets, like skin even, and immediately I can see that some of the bumps and the inconsistencies or the blotchiness of the skin is just going to disappear. Same thing applies for her makeup being inconsistent there. It's going to smooth that out. And so that's what I mean by a very subtle application of Topaz Clean. But when it comes to exaggeration, exaggeration essentially means you're going to crank things up. So let's crank this up to about 3. I want the edges to be accented, so let's give the edges some more definition. And let's make sure the edges are sharper, so I'll just crank up the sharpness there as well. So you got to keep in mind that a few seconds ago, this used to look like just a photograph, whereas now it looks like an illustration, and I will zoom out of it here once again so you can see how it has applied to the entire image. So that's the before there, and here's the after. So that's a little example of the kind of things that you can do with Topaz Clean. It's a really wonderful way of very artistically smoothing out features that are in your photographs. Now that we've seen what it's like to smooth things out, I'm going to kind of go to the opposite end of the spectrum, where we're going to talk about what it's like to actually sharpen up details. So we saw a little bit of sharpness within focus, but now we're going to dive into a more creative way of sharpening with Topaz's Detail. Okay, again, right inside of iPhoto, just double-click on it, and I'll zoom in on it slightly so you can see what's going on. So let's take the small details and crank it up. Now, normally, when it comes to portraits of men, that's all I would do. I just kind of like go in there and give it just a little bit of a tab of the small details. That's what it used to look like. That's what it looks like now. But for the purposes of demonstration, I'm going to really exaggerate all of these sliders. Now, you notice that over here it says we have small, medium, and large details. And that's the way the Topaz Detail breaks things down. So it's very easy to understand. If you only wanted to accentuate the small details, you would just crank that up, and that's exactly what it's going to do. Now, the reason why I am exaggerating is because normally, if you are in Photoshop, and if you were to take an image like this and sharpen it, you would get these ringing artifacts, where the edges actually have kind of like a double-edged effect. Whereas in Topaz, you get this very natural look of things getting sharper and more detailed without having some of the classic sharpening problems. And as always, Topaz has got wonderful presets over here, and my favorite one is this one right here, which is black and white contrasted. And the most stunning black and white conversions that I've ever done have been just by clicking on black and white contrasted. It's that easy, and I click OK, and I got results. So now I'm left the best for last, and this is when we're going to go back into Photoshop and jump into our favorite program here at Topaz Labs, which is Remask. All right. Let me load up actually an image that I normally don't demonstrate. Just I have one over here from a while back. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, I think it might be this one right here. There we go. Okay, that's the one I was looking for. All right, let me maximize that so you can see what's going on. This is the original photograph, and we want to be able to mask her out so we can put her in front of this background right here. And here is the entire process. First, under Filter, hold down the Topaz Labs' Topaz Remask 3. So here's the interface. Now you're going to first notice how it makes the entire image green. Green tells Topaz what you want to keep. Okay. Now also, by default, it chooses a blue brush. The blue brush is what's going to tell Topaz what it's going to think about or what it's going to compute. Now you're noticing that all you want to do with the blue brush is just kind of go around the perimeter, highlighting every area that you think is very difficult to mask. And she has really frizzy hair, so it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but let's see if Topaz can take care of even these most subtle details. As I come around the edge, you notice that I'm changing the brush size. I'm doing that using the keyboard shortcuts that everybody's already familiar with in Photoshop, which is the left and right bracket keys. And I'm going to make sure that I get every little detail in there. And since I'm using a mouse, I'm not very accurate, but that really doesn't really matter just because, you know, you're just doing a rough outlines anyways. So it doesn't really matter if you're accurate or not as you go around the edges. Okay, so once you got that outline done, choose the red bucket fill and fill the outside with red. Red tells Topaz what you don't want, okay, basically what you want to throw away or whatever the background is. Once you've done that, you click on the compute button, or you can also hit the enter key on the keyboard, and here is what it just came up with. We can look at our image either as the keep, or we can look at it as the original image. I usually like to work with it in a keep, and sometimes I'll even put it so that I can see two images side by side. Now it looks pretty good, but we do have a few problems. First of all, as I look at the original image here on the right-hand side, the background is green, and that's why we got some of that background that's still bleeding through, some of that original background color. There's a wonderful new solution here now at Topaz Labs, which is called Foreground Color Recovery. Let me zoom in on that here so everybody can see what it says, Foreground Color Recovery. And I'm just going to crank it up. Let's crank it up here all the way. And at this point, it's just a matter of touching or clicking on whatever you see is contaminated. Like over here, I see there's a little bit of green in there, so I just click on it. Immediately, it cleans it up. So all I want you to do right now is, as you're doing your mask, is just go around the perimeter, clicking on the things where you see the problem, and just let Topaz take care of those details. And I'll make it full screen here for you, just so you can see what's going on. Now remember, right now we are viewing actually the keep channel. I could be viewing the mask channel or whatever else I like, but keep is a nice way to work because it allows you to see exactly your cutout just against a bland background. And even if you wanted to change the color of that background, under here where it says set background color, you can change that background color to be anything you want. Yeah. So, but I like working with the neutral gray. It gives me a nice way of checking my edges and making sure everything's working right. Okay. Now right now you're noticing that the only thing that I'm doing is just clicking. Every time I see a little bit of that color contamination, I click with that red brush, and that's when it takes care of the details. Okay, I see a little bit of that green overlaying over there, so let's click on that. And I see a problem over here. You see how I'm not really getting that edge very well? So just by touching that edge, immediately it forces Topaz to reevaluate that edge, and again, it just cleans it up. Okay. I think it's looking pretty good. Let's kind of go around the edges here, make sure we didn't miss anything. Actually, let's get right there. Let's make sure we get that too. And as I go around, I want to take care of these little tiny ghosting problems that once in a while happens. And again, the only thing that I'm doing right now is just clicking every time I see that problem. All right. I think we're all set. If it looks good, you hit the OK button. Ta-da! And that's our final composite. You got to keep in mind that a few seconds ago, this is what it used to look like. This is what it looks like now. And as I zoom in on it, you can see that every little fine detail of her hair has been perfectly preserved. And we just created this beautiful composite. And it really didn't take that long, and it was pretty straightforward. So that is Topaz Remask 3. It's the latest generation of Remask. So at this point, I really don't know where I am in time. Nicole, what are we doing as far as time goes?
You actually have about 10 more minutes of presentation time, or we can switch.
I have about 10 more minutes left. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Because it gives me an opportunity to do a few other things that I normally don't do in a demonstration. One of the products of Topaz Labs that I almost never talk about is Topaz JPEG. Now you can see that this image is suffering from pretty bad JPEG artifacts. You can see the macro blocking or these square problems that are all across the image. This image originally was about 5.5 megabytes, and now it's less than 50 kilobytes, so it's really, really tiny. So let me show you how you would correct that problem. Again, as before, just choose Edit an External Editor, but this time choose Topaz JPEG. And I'm going to zoom in very, very, very close over here just so you can see how bad the JPEG problem is. And in this case, it's as easy as choosing one of our presets. Let's try Very Noisy JPEG, and it's already fixed. So this is what it used to look like, and this is what it looks like now. In the original, you couldn't really see the contour of that line very well, where you can see that now Topaz has done an amazing job of trying to restore it. If you look at the original image, you also notice how the yellow is kind of bleeding into the skin, as well as how the pinks and the reds over here are kind of bleeding across. Whereas when you look at the after version, you can see how, again, Topaz just does a brilliant job of fixing that problem. I'll go here to close to the face. Once again, there's the before, there's the after, and let's take a look here at the eyes. Again, there's the before, and there's the after. So if you are processing, sometimes clients send you photographs that have been very heavily JPEG'd. The JPEG from Topaz really does miracles when you have those kinds of problems. And if you are a professional photographer that likes to photograph using JPEG instead of RAW, Topaz JPEG can really save some of that fine detail that normally would have been lost because you shot JPEG. It's a great way of making your JPEG photos almost look like they've been raw photographs. So we still have probably another 5 minutes or so, right, Nicole?
Yes, and actually we have a couple requests.
Okay.
We have a request from Lily. She'd like to see a little bit of Simplify, and then Kathy would like to see some HDR images, the HDR look that Adjust can provide.
Okay. Absolutely, that HDR look that Adjust can do. Okay. Well, what I did earlier actually with the Eiffel Tower is a really great example of how you're creating HDR from one single photograph. But to kind of like answer that question in a slightly more in-depth answer, this is an example that normally you find with Adobe Photoshop. This is actually the example that teaches you how to do HDR. And they show you here how you have to have 1, 2, 3, 4 exposures, and when you combine all the exposures together, you create an HDR image. Well, here with Topaz Labs, I did something a little different. I took only that one image there, which is only one of those exposures, and we give you incredible results. Now, when you compare them, here's what's going on. Notice that in the original image, if you do it with 4 exposures, the palm leaves are blurry. Well, that's because if you go back to those 4 images and you look out the window over here, you're going to notice how the wind moves the leaves. Whereas in contrast, when you look at what we do here at Topaz, which is this one right here, it's perfectly sharp. So here's what happens from 4 exposures, and here's what happens with only 1. And this was essentially done with a combination of using Topaz Denoise and Topaz Adjust. And you can tone map it any way you want, but this shows you how you can do HDR or an HDR kind of a look without necessarily having multiple exposures. And I'm actually using Adobe's own example to showcase that. But as far as the other question that came up, which was, let me kind of escape out here for a second. The question was for Topaz Simplify. Okay, another one of my favorite products at Topaz Labs. First of all, I'll show you a few examples of things that I've done with Simplify, and then we'll see how it works. Here's the original photo I started out with. Here's what we create from it. Here's another original photo that I started out with. Actually, in this case, I did 2 different versions here. I did one version that makes it look like a pencil sketch, and I did another version that makes it look like a cartoon. So let's show you how that works. Nicole, I hope we're okay with time because this is going to take about 2 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. You have enough time.
Yeah. All right, here we go. So we're going to try to convert this Ferrari into a work of art, and we double-click on Topaz Simplify. And again, you could do this in Photoshop or all the other products just the same way. Along the right-hand side, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, and you can see that there is a slider that says Simplify Size. I want you to pay attention to the Ferrari logo. As I move only one slider, suddenly the Ferrari logo disappears. In fact, not only does the logo disappear, even the headlights have magically disappeared as well. What's happening is that Topaz Simplify is removing details based on size, based on basically the size of a particular detail on an image. Now you can use this to reduce the effects of polka dots or acne or anything that's size related. Now to highlight that even further, if I bring that slider down, you notice how I can bring the little yellow emblem of the Ferrari back, whereas now the horse has disappeared. Well, that's because right now the horse is smaller than the size that I specified. So this way it gives you a really amazing artistic control over throwing away details that normally an artist would not draw, which is essentially the reason why we call it simplified, because artists have a tendency of simplifying the images that are coming in through their eyes. They don't draw every detail. Since I want to make this look like a black and white work of art, I kill the saturation. I'm going to make it brighter so it looks like I drew it on a piece of paper. And in this case, I'm trying to make it look like shading is going on over here. And then finally, we come to the edges. Now, by default, they're going to be color edges, but let's actually change that to mono. Mono is for black and white, and you crank up the edge strength. So now, for the first time, we can actually see the edges applied to our image. But we also see a problem, and that is, if you look at the original, there were reflections right here, and the computer is finding these edges and lines where the reflections were. Now, these are lines that an artist would never draw. So that's why, using the reduce weak, we can crank that up. And so it's going to take some of these weaker edges that an artist would never really consider, and it's going to just magically get rid of them. And so essentially what you just saw on the screen is how, in a matter of seconds, you can take photographs that just was like a general normal photograph, and you can convert it to, in this case, a pen and marker illustration. And there are countless things that we do with Topaz Simplify to create these really stunning painterly kind of effects. Once again, there is the original image I started out with. First a little bit of Topaz Adjust, and then finally Topaz Simplify. So you can see in this image how I used a combination of Topaz filters to get the final effect. I hope that answers the question about Topaz Simplify. Is there anything else, Nicole?
Excuse me. No, I think that's great. Let's see here. We have a couple questions coming in. When you were working with a remask, did you have a brush selected, a specific brush selected when you were working with the recovery slider?
No, you don't have to have any brush selected. Essentially, with the new recovery feature, what you're doing is you're forcing the program to reevaluate that specific area as far as getting rid of the color bleeding. So you can either choose the, let's say, the background brush, which is the red brush, and that's actually what I was doing. I just had a red brush selected as I went around the perimeter, clicking on some of the areas where I saw that color contamination. So that's how it was cleaning up that color bleeding that was coming in around the edges.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was great. I think that was an awesome introduction and demonstration of all of our products. And if anybody has any questions, we can go ahead and take those now and see if Greg and I can answer them for you. So just go ahead and type any questions you may have into the questions module, and I will, let's see here. Richard asks, what is dual color selection in Remask?
Okay, dual color selection, really good question. There's oftentimes a situation where you have veils or any kind of other transparent area like glass and smoke. There's a lot of instances where extracting really subtle details from the background are very, very difficult. It's a little bit longer for me to actually show it to you. What I recommend you do to see a great example of how dual color selection works is go to YouTube. In fact, I'll do that here right in front of you just so you can see it. Now, the screen is still mine, right, Nicole?
It is.
It is? Okay. So when you go to YouTube, just do a search for Topaz Remask 3, okay? And when you do that, you're going to find the Topaz Remask 3 tutorial, okay? In fact, let me click on this one right over here. And there's a part of that tutorial, let me kind of like fast forward it over here. You can see that here I talk about how to mask a veil away from its background. And in this part of the tutorial, I actually talk about the dual color selection. Yeah, sorry if I can't show it to you right now. It just would take a little longer than like a Q&A section of the demo goes, or this presentation.
That's great,
I
though.
recommend you check out this Topaz Remask 3 tutorial on YouTube.
Okay, that's perfect. And that's a good resource for everybody to check out as well. Let's see here. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Let's see. I have that. How would you recommend working with hair that is not a severe contrast, such as the picture you were working with had that dark green and then blonde hair? I've had a couple questions saying, you know, is there a different way to work with hair that's more closer to the background color, less contrasty?
Right. No, that's a perfect question. Remask does a pretty phenomenal job at finding differences that are there. Even if there's the slightest amount of difference between one and the other, it will find it. The best way of answering that question is first, with the dual color selection technology that's now in Topaz Remask 3, you can very easily actually take even the most difficult hair that is of a similar color against the background and extract it. Now, there are certain areas where in compositing or in masking that are called implied edges, meaning that the computer does not see any kind of a color difference between the foreground and the background, whereas the human mind knows, based on its intelligence, that there's actually something there. Now, in those cases, if it's, let's say, black hair against a black background and they're both black, then there really isn't much that the computer can do to be able to recover that information. And in those cases, it's more of a matter of just kind of like manually going in there and filling in on the mask channel in Photoshop, actually, where you would think that hair is. But you're going to be surprised at how well Topaz is going to find even the slightest amount of details and the slightest amount of differences. And again, I would recommend using the new dual color selection for those kinds of circumstances.
Okay, great. Now, Remask, Natalie just asked whether or not Remask only works in Photoshop and not Elements. Actually, Natalie, Remask does work in Photoshop Elements and Paint Shop Pro as well. It will not work in iPhoto or Aperture because they do not have layer capabilities. So if you want to see all of our compatibility, you can go to our website, which is www.topazlabs.com, and then you can go to our support page, which has a link to all the compatibility. But yes, Remask does work in Elements. Let's see here. Okay, Greg, one last question here for you before we go ahead and end this. In Adjust, is sharpening a different process than it is in Detail? Richard would like to know.
Yes, they're actually two very, very different algorithms. Topaz Detail is based on very recent advancements in sharpening. Actually, the technical paper for Detail was published within the last 5 or 6 years, so it's really new stuff. Topaz Adjust, the way that Adjust does sharpening or details, is a very different kind of a technology that does not use the paradigm of small, medium, and large details. They're very different from each other, and you're going to find that if sharpening or enhancing details is what you're really interested in, I recommend using Detail more than I recommend the sharpening features in Adjust.
Okay, thank you. And one last quick question. Is there a way to convert color to black and white using Topaz products?
Yeah. When I was actually showing you the cowboy photo over here, in fact, I'll do that for you instantly right in front of you. Yeah, within Topaz Detail, you're going to find, in my opinion, one of the best color to black and white converters. It's a preset. It says right here, actually, black and white contrasted. All you do is just click on that preset, and you get stunning black and white conversions. And the main reason why this looks as good as it does is because the way that Topaz sharpens images is so unique that it tries to capture some of that crisp lines that you get from black and white photography. And as I go back and forth here between the color image and the black and white image, you probably noticed that. I hope that comes across on this webinar. But it really just makes your black and white pop with this beautiful contrast, sharp lines.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate it, and I think this has been very informative.